Hi, everyone. Welcome back to those who are new. Well, welcome to those who have already subscribed. Thank you for those who are newly subscribed. And we are going to continue the conversation on family matters and also regarding the parents and adults in that situation as well. So, this conversation really comes from a posed question that I have for you all, which is what was your relationship like with your parents? What is or what was your relationship like with your parents? Why is it important? That's what we're going to talk about today. So, there are moments that can catch some parents off guard, and it typically is not something super big or a serious event, but something small like a tone of voice that may seem off, a look that your child or someone in the house may give you, or simply a refusal of something, or even a question that may seem like it's been asked at the wrong time. Okay. And your response may suddenly feel stronger than what that moment actually calls for. And it's not just an irritation that you may be experiencing or even giving off, but it's something that's quite sharper, maybe even quieter or faster than what you even anticipated. You might even correct that moment quickly or move on, but later you may have realized that that reaction that took place in that moment felt very, very familiar. This is where the conversation actually begins with us today. All right, let's go. So, parenting, it has a way of bringing old learning, old habits, old experiences to the surface, not as clear memories, but as reflexes, those automatic responses. It's not like you consciously think about your parents right before you begin to respond to your child or to your children, and you don't intentionally choose to repeat or reject what you grew up with. It just seems to show up in how much patience you have and what you expect your children to already know, and how you handle conflict, and also the things that seems to make you uncomfortable. So for some parents, this is confusing because they believed that those chapters, that those experiences was already closed. They thought and believed that it was already over and done with. And it can also be assumed that because so much time has passed and because you may not have spoken about it for so long, that time has automatically resolved those things. And if something wasn't necessarily talked about, it may be believed that it doesn't matter anymore. And that is not true. You may also believe that just because you're functioning, because you're providing, you're still showing up, that whatever happened back then doesn't necessarily affect you today. This is why we're conversating about this today. Because families don't work like that. Your relationships don't work like that. Because what was not dealt with in the past, what is being avoided, it doesn't just disappear. It adapts. It adapts to your new life. It finds a quieter way to live in the body, and it has louder ways of coming up to the surface when stress appears. When stress seems to be the center of attention, it shows its face. And so, for our dear parents, the relationship with your own parent, for some of you, it may have been distant, but it still felt like it was fine. For some, there may not have been a major rupture, no type of obvious conflict. It's just a lot of things just was never said, but you continue to move forward anyway. For others, the relationship may have been complicated, inconsistent, and emotionally unpredictable. And that may have also involved overly controlled situations. And some parents grew up having to mature much earlier than they needed to, learning to manage adults rather than vice versa, being managed or being led by the adults. So none of these experiences vanish just because you yourself have become a parent. They just become the context from which you parent. And the thing that may surprise some parents is not that their childhood mattered, but how it mattered. It shows up in the moments where you feel the urge to shut things down quickly, or when you feel like you are responsible for everyone's emotions, when you have to be that person in the room to tend to everyone's needs, or when you feel deeply uncomfortable when your child is disappointment with their anger, even with their sadness. It can also show up as you overcorrecting, trying to give your children the opposite of what you had: more freedom, more affirmation. Let's be closer. You are driven from a place of your needs from the past not being fulfilled and not being addressed. So, other times, this may look like recreating structure, distance, or control because that's what feels familiar to you. It feels like it's stabilizing the situation in a way that makes you feel safe and comfortable. And neither of these responses that are mentioned is random. It's all rooted in what you learned about safety, what you learned about connection, and what you learned about attention. Attention being given, attention received. And so sometimes it's not realized that parenting, it doesn't just activate love, it activates memory. Not the kind that you may describe, but it's the kind that lives in the expectations that we have and the reactions. And that's why in some situations it may feel disproportionately charged. Like you're not just responding to what's happening now, you're responding to the moment that it represents because it's still embedded somewhere inside. There are parents who feel an intense need to be respected, parents who feel unsettled when their authority is questioned, parents who become anxious when things are unstructured, and those who shut down when conversations turn emotional, parents who become overly responsible, overly patient, and overly accommodating until they're not. And that can look like those who are just very, very lenient, more than is what is called for in a particular situation. Sometimes it may look like you just bottling everything up, keeping it to yourself. Keyword bottling up until there is no more room for you to receive anything else. And there may be an explosion or some type of implosion. This whole thing is really about understanding that parenting does not happen in isolation. You don't start fresh simply because you want to. You start with the nervous system that learned things early in your childhood, in your past, and sometimes accurately for that environment at a particular cost. So when life gets busy, when it becomes stressful, overwhelming, those early lessons that you had taken on may take over, especially those that have not been addressed, especially those that have been ignored. They're still there. So they sometimes may lie dormant until the perfect opportunity comes for them to show themselves yet again to say, I'm still here. I'm still very yet present in your life today, just as I was before when in your childhood or when you were younger. And so sometimes parents may notice this when they feel resentment that they can't necessarily explain. Others notice it when they feel numb. Some feel guilty for wanting space, for wanting closeness, and they may feel bad for wanting to feel connected to those that are in the home, those that you want to be the closest to. Wanting to do better and be better without necessarily knowing what better is. And the tension can be common because it has gone unnamed for so long. And so the thing that can make this hard to talk about is that parents are expected to have this forward facing attitude, to carry such strength, regardless of what has taken place before. Focusing on their children, focusing on solutions, focusing on doing better. Looking back for you may feel like an indulgent in a sense. It may feel unnecessary, or it may even feel uncomfortable. None of the above, or all that and more. But ignoring the past doesn't make it less influential in your life. It just makes it less visible, or at least sometimes we pretend it's that way. But here's the thing, there is a quiet grief that some parents carry. It's a grief for what they didn't receive, it's a grief for what they feel like they were missing, a grief for the version of parenting that they are trying to build, but they don't know how to do that because it was never modeled for them. They didn't receive that example. And so the grief doesn't always show up as sadness, being very tearful. It could sometimes show up as being irritated, exhaustion, having self doubt. It may even come out sideways and coming out in ways that you may later feel like you regret releasing to your loved ones, or even saying things about yourself. The important thing to understand is that becoming aware of how your relationship with your parents still shows up is not about digging up old pain. It's not about trying to reconcile or hash things out with people from your past. It's about understanding what exactly you are working with, because every family is building and working forward towards something. And patterns don't repeat themselves just because people want them to. They repeat themselves because it's familiar. It's what we're used to, unless something comes in to break and shift that pattern or even the direction that it's going in. Some parents become reactive to certain behaviors without really knowing why. Others avoid conflict altogether, even when it's something that matters to them. Some struggle to tolerate their child's emotions because emotions weren't tolerated when they were growing up during their upbringing. Others may feel overwhelmed by their responsibility because they learned early that they had to manage everything. And so, if they have been doing that since however young they were, it may seem like they've never had the opportunity to truly catch their breath, to truly breathe, and to know what it means to live outside of the survival state. These are not character flaws. They are adaptations of the environment, of what you learned. And so the risk is not having a history, of course. The risk is believing and assuming that history has no impact whatsoever. What is not examined does not stay neutral, but it can shape the tone, the expectations, and it can set the limits. Children don't need perfect parents. So please give yourself permission to throw that expectation out the window. Throw it out. Children do not need perfect parents, because what does that even look like? Seriously. Something that they do require with their experience is consistency, emotional availability, and repair. Those are some of the things that are harder to offer when parts of you are still responding to the old dynamic. And so that's why, yeah, you have your children now, but you still need to be taken care of as well. You are so important. You are needed. And it's just like, how long will you be able to move forward, not addressing the things that may have hurt you? I'll just put a pause right there. It's just something to think about. So in these things is where generational impact becomes real. It becomes steady because children learn how to relate based on watching how adults handle life, how adults handle stress, the power that they have, conflicts, and closeness. And not just what they say, of course, but what they do. They are sponges of watching what we do. How do we handle pressure? What are the things that we avoid? What are some of the things that we may be afraid of? How do we handle situations at hand when things start to escalate? And what do we repair and what don't we repair? Some parents may worry that acknowledging these things means that they have failed, but it certainly doesn't mean that. It just means that you're paying attention. And awareness alone doesn't change behavior. It just creates the space between reaction and response. And it creates space between what happened then and what's happening now. The space is important and it's needed. So just know that you don't have to resolve everything from your past in order for you to parent responsibly. But understanding what's still active can help you recognize when a moment belongs to the present and when you are carrying more weight from your past than it should in the present moment. That is activating the discernment that you have, not blame, discernment and wisdom of how to move forward with yourself and family. So, as you've probably heard me say before, families don't repeat patterns because, they don't care. They repeat patterns because sometimes the family as a whole, or just maybe an individual, hasn't slowed down long enough to actually pay attention to it, to notice it. And looking back is not about staying in that place. We don't want to stay in the past, but it's really to help us understand what you are bringing forward and to do it all with intention. And so if you're a parent and this feels close to home, please let me reiterate, this is not for you to solve anything immediately. Just take the information, meditate on it, and you get to decide with your family how you want to move forward, and even decide with yourself some of the things that you may feel still needs to be addressed from your past that may not have been addressed fully before. So with this information, you guys get to determine the changes that you get to make over time, and know that it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be instant, but intentionally. And so you all have my well wishes for the journey that you all are on together. And until next time, take care of yourselves and love on yourself and each other.